Good morning,
Good morning.
Texas.
Good morning, Texas.
He was getting his flex juice ready because, Matt happens to be wearing our newest
I know, I'm excited
apparel
about this.
drop.
And-
It is our muscle tank tee. We have to send one to Pat McAfee
I agree.
because, he loves our Mecum tanks, and so does our auctioneer Matt McCorvick. So it's available starting today here at Dallas, and I'm really excited. But it's also episode 17 and day one of Dallas.
Day one of Dallas, and you have another new piece.
I do.
Right?
It's a hitch. It's a hitch cover. It's got the M block. It's also how I'm going to high five and say hello to people for the rest of the auction. But they are also available today, starting here at Dallas, but also online. So check those out. It's actually really nice.
It looks nice. I like the chrome finish.
Yeah, I don't have a trailer spot on my car, so I just probably have to get one just so I can rock this cool M
trailer
block logo.
spot?
Or a trailer
I think
hitch
they
thing.
call that a hitch.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Everything is bigger in Texas, including Matt's sassiness. So,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, as we say, welcome to Mecum in the Morning. We are very excited to kick off Mecum Dallas here Wednesday, September 4th, and we've got quite a rundown for the day. We've got 305 vehicles slated to cross the auction block. That contains vehicles within 3 different collections, and there's 26 pieces of road art today, Breon.
there is a lot going on this week. 300 vehicles pretty much slated every day throughout the 4 days that we're here. So there's a lot of really cool vehicles here today, and even some cool motorcycles. One of the first motorcycles to roll off the block this morning is a GL 1000, a Honda. We all know that I like that Goldwing kind of style, so I'd like to see who that Goldwing goes home to. Maybe it's you, Matt.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All kinds of new things. Tank tops, motorcycles,
Trailer hitches.
Yeah. You know, Breon, one of the things that stands out about this particular auction are some of the collections that we have. We have an incredible lineup, and one of the big ones that has a lot of vehicles in it and a lot of story behind it is coming from the Kelsey collection. And we were able to send our TV crew out there, and they put together a very nice package detailing just some of the ins and outs of the vehicles within that. And then we're going to show that. When we come back, we've got a special guest who's going to fill us in more.
The first indication that this collection is something special is when you walk up to the front door and enter and see not only just the cars, but the aura of an era that's long gone.
The founding member, Paul, you've got a person that was collecting cars before World War II. I mean, those are the people that started this as a hobby.
Paul Kelsey was a man in the early 1900s, an entrepreneur looking for any way he could support his family. Cars, as the story goes, was part of his passion growing up with his dad, and he wanted to continue that with his son along the way.
Paul Kelsey, at a very early age, decided that cars that he remembered from his past and cars that he owned, he wanted to keep them, and he wanted to chronicle those cars and let people know about some of these cars, some commonplace, some obscure, and began literally a lifelong of automobile collecting. So the collection began up in Minnesota, and Paul had an idea that he maybe wanted to head someplace where maybe there might be an audience, a leisure destination for his growing collection.
The Ozarks Mountains in Missouri, land of good old mountain music.
He ran across Camdenton, Missouri, and just absolutely fell in love with the area and decided that's where he was going to move his family and his collection.
He decided to open his own museum with his son in order to give back to the community and start sharing some of this car knowledge that they both had. His son growing up also loved cars, so it was a father-son mission.
When I was a boy, when we'd go on family vacations, my dad would always take us to a car museum. So I know I was at the museum in probably 1965-ish.
The collection spans from the late 1800s all the way to the mid-1970s. So they have a little bit of everything they've collected over their lifetimes that they thought was neat. Makes and models I never even heard of back in the early 1900s, that companies were just being excited and trying to produce cars that they thought would live a long life and didn't make it back then. So seeing some of this stuff is purely history and decades of automobiles.
When the Kelsey Museum find is offered and sold in Dallas, there's approximately 70 cars. There's a handful of cars that are total projects. And then there's, you start as early as 1899. There's a 1902 Pierce that I think is the oldest Pierce in existence. There's an enclosed Franklin. Early enclosed cars are practically impossible to find. And then there's some muscle cars from the 60s.
One of the stars of the collection is a 1933 Auburn.
Super rare. Only 14 were built. Now keep in mind, Auburn got caught up like everybody did in the Depression era. Formed in the early 1900s. By the late 1930s, the company was out of business. But boy, they sure produce some automobiles. This has got a potent 160 horsepower, 12-cylinder engine. It's a 3-speed manual transmission. And it's been owned by the family for 58 years.
We've researched that car enough to learn that we've got history and ownership going all the way back to 1936. So to have that kind of documentation or insight on the car, a car that's been around for all this time and know where it's been, is tremendous for the next person in their collection.
There's the 1914 Stutz Bearcat, which is considered by Stutz aficionados to be the holy grail Stutz.
The 4E model, E meaning a lot of technology, an electric starter and electric lights. Keep in mind, this was an early time period for automobiles, and conveniences we take for granted today weren't back then. And what really makes the Bearcat so special and so desirable was the performance that these cars actually had for the time period. They were considered a sports car, a performance car, maybe even a muscle car of that era.
And it is by far, quite possibly, worth as much as all the other cars in the collection.
Paul and John Kelsey working together to manage this collection of cars is going to be a huge benefit to all of us in the collector car community.
What Mecum has decided to do is keep these cars basically untouched like Paul and John have done over the past almost 100 years. We are taking extreme caution even moving these cars, so the next person gets to claim the rights of if they want to keep it original or they want to restore it for their personal collection or a museum. So we've captured the essence of their vision of what would happen to these cars.
There's cars that are once in a lifetime cars, but more than that, it's a once in a lifetime experience when you say that. I think the best word is to call it a museum find.
I haven't seen anything like this in the past 10 years, at minimum, of where you're able to get something that no one's been into in those decades of cars.
I have called it a treasure chest, and I really do mean that. I think that this is a real opportunity for folks to get cars that really exude a personality of originality, which as time goes on becomes more and more important, more and more popular with collectors.
Wow, what an amazing collection. And as John Kraman calls it, it is truly a treasure chest. Treasure chest. Woo! But I'm more excited because one of my favorite office buddies is here, who has been the keeper of the keys for this collection and a lot. Gus, why don't you let us know really quick, or the viewers know, what do you do at Mecum and why do you get the special seat today?
Well, I got the special seat today so we can talk about the Kelsey collection. And
Yeah.
what I do is kind of go out and visit with clients or potential clients and find cars that are most interesting for our auction. Some of the things that we get to highlight and see start with years of learning about them. And that's how the Kelsey collection came together, knowing John Kelsey about 7 years overall before he passed recently, and getting to know him and getting to know his cars then ultimately.
And I think you actually touched on something, is sometimes a collection just doesn't happen overnight, or the way that we bring a collection to Mecum, it's through years and years of relationships. Like you said, you were talking to John Kelsey for 7 years.
Yeah, and that's it. It just, we have so many ways of getting cars, but ultimately, great cars aren't just handed to us. We have to work through the relationship and figure out if they're a good fit, if we're okay to carry the torch for them when they're not with us. And John Kelsey unfortunately wasn't. He told me right up front he would never be able to sell these cars when he was alive.
Yeah.
You know,
Because they're so emotional, right?
They were,
people
because-
build these collections over
Well,
decades.
it
In
was,
this case,
yeah. In this case, it was his dad and his grandfather, so it's generational right down to his 2 daughters.
yeah.
So it was.
One of the things I was really excited about as I was learning about the collection is when they started it and how they were getting selling or getting fees to be able to start it was through popcorn, selling popcorn, correct?
Popcorn. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's kind of what started. He needed money to support his family.
Yeah.
And back in the day, there was no popcorn vendors at the movies.
Yeah.
So he came up with that idea, and that's what they did for many, many years.
And it
throughout.
worked.
It
right?
did.
Yeah.
It worked. Yeah, those pennies that they sold him for back then for bags, paid for him and his family even to move from Minnesota to Camdenton, Missouri,
Yeah.
to start the museum.
Gus, what was the overall focus of how they went about acquiring the vehicles? Did they have a particular theme in mind?
He didn't. He just bought cars that he was able to afford, that he fancied over his lifetime, and his grandfather touched, and his father. So everyone had a personal relationship with each car. They remember driving in one or having one, and obviously one of the great cars in the collection is the Stutz. So that was something that was coveted way back then, pre-war, that he wanted, and his dad wanted, and grandfather. So they were able to afford that car back then, and it remains one of the most coveted cars of the pre-war cars that are available today.
I have to say, just seeing that thing in person, we've seen the videos, we've seen the photos, but seeing in person is just it's like a work of art. It's such a beautiful.
It really
vehicle.
is. There's so many technological advances back then that are still used today that you can't imagine they thought of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's to drive it, it's rather complicated. Where the pedals are, our steering wheel is.
Did you drive it?
I have not driven it. I've sat in it,
Okay.
and
I'd get anxiety trying to figure out how to drive it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not as simple as it looks.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
And Gus, that car has race provenance, that it essentially was kind of born from a Indy 500 competitor.
Correct. And that's why it's so valuable, because that's what started the Indianapolis 500, is that style of car and that race car. So in today's world, it's still cherished that way. It started the whole Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the past 100 years.
I think in the video that we watched, there's a photo of John Kelsey driving it on the Indy Speedway, right?
Correct. Yeah, that was something his dad actually did as well, and then John did, and his daughters were too emotional to even bring it there to do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a car is more than just a piece of metal. For the most part, when it comes to collections or collector cars, there's an emotional piece to it.
There is, and meeting all these different collectors around the country that I am blessed to be part of, each one has that common heartstring. I mean, they literally sometimes put their cars as their kids.
Yeah.
And
they name them.
They name them.
Yeah.
They name them. They don't want to let them go.
Yeah.
And they try and hold them back.
But no, let me change. We've come across some people, some consigners, like over the last 6 months that I've been with Mecum, and they'll say they're ready to sell it, and then they'll set the reserve so high, right? And they know, they're like, I know the reserve's high, but I'm just not sure I'm ready to let it go.
Exactly. Seller's anxiety.
Yeah,
That's my term. I'm like, throughout the whole process, you're getting to know the client, know the cars, you're obviously setting up the car for the market.
Yep.
Right. And initially, a lot of people have that. They figure they'll protect themselves, that they're doing their due diligence, they're bringing it to the auction, but if they set the reserve high enough, they just might not sell it, right? So they're still safe. We've had, through our experiences, we've had some folks that we've had to, just let it go and see what happens at the auction. And then it hits that number, and they're actually shocked and emotional, and they don't want to sell at that point, right? So, they're in a different daze at that point, seeing their car leave because they didn't think it was going to do the numbers it did. So, and they all mean something to somebody, right? There's, I call it our market value and emotional value. There's two values everyone lives by.
Yep.
And, sometimes you might not get to that emotional number, and sometimes you do. There's just no reason, or some cars do some kind of money because someone else has the same interest in it.
I think Matt's looking at us because we've gone off track.
Yeah, we are. I'm going to go on track too. Yeah. I was leading somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So,
Back to
Matt, put
Kelsey.
us back.
Sure. Well, I was going to say all that is true, guys. I agree. One of my favorite aspects of this collection, I think that speaks to how the team at Mecum really do eat, sleep, and breathe the love of classic cars, is the fact that Dana Mecum had memories of going to this museum years ago and just remembering it.
Yeah, with his dad, exactly, and that's really what part of that whole other side of the connection there is that he got personal with it. It brought him back to when we were able to go there. When I first met John and Dana and I went there eventually, that's when it all hit home with him. He then remembered being there, but then it became his journey with his dad at this museum. So it was a good emotional time for everybody, to realize that.
And we've talked about the Studs Bearcat. Another standout from the collection, Gus, is this 1933 Auburn. Fill Brianna and I a little bit in on this car's historical significance and some of the details.
Well, as it's also pre-war with all that, it's just later edition of a pre-war car. So back then it was everybody's, let's call it, significant car, and they were very few. And a lot of the actors and actresses back then were given cars, and this one was part of the history. Provenance is that supposedly it was belonging to Clark Gable, right? So back then, so nothing was documented back then except movies that you see them with, and black and white movies and all the other things, and they wouldn't even register them in their name. We've literally documented this car from present owner all the way back to a 3-year window when this car was built, where that's the window that would have been given to him but not registered to him, just because that's how they did back then in the movies.
A handshake and a
handshake
nod,
and thanks for the movies and here's your car, right? So
I would love if someone just gave me a car.
Exactly. So it is without a doubt one of the besides just having him associated with it and over the years with the museum, it's still the car to own. It's probably one of the coolest things that everyone's looking for in a collection of pre-war cars.
And of course, those two cars are the standouts, right?
Yes.
But there's so many other cars that are coming out of this collection. Can you touch on maybe a couple others?
Well, the part of back to the original question of why they collected things, since they were entrepreneurs with the popcorn industry, let's call it that, first ones there, they have a lot of cars that were only made one particular year or only had a run of 4 or 5 cars in the Minnesota area because that's where they're originally from. So a lot of these cars existed back then for a brief period of time.
Very brief, if there's only 4 made.
Exactly. So, and then they had them and put them in their collection and just hang on to them the whole time. So, their idea of collection was just because it was personal to them where they lived, personal that they were entrepreneurs. Someone started a car company out of nothing and made a car, right? It was a little more, it was as simple as that, but complicated because nobody knew how to make cars back then. So
I think you and I've become very emotional about this collection just because there's been so many things talked about it. And one of the things that I would love is to see some of these cars go back to the Ozark area because of the history and where they've lived for so long and the Kelsey family and everything. I would love to see some buyers take them back and maybe, down the road we can go back and visit them, in a place like that. But I love it. There's a Galaxy that actually I love from the collection.
Yeah,
I can't get it, but that red Galaxy really sparked my interest.
Yeah, that is definitely a later model in that collection. That's the tail end of their collection there in the 60s. But another great car that
that's
no
one
one's
I
seen forever.
Wouldn't have anxiety about trying to drive. The earlier ones, I wouldn't know what to do. Yeah.
The earlier ones are a little challenging.
They are.
And when are these cars starting across the block?
They're starting across the block tomorrow, Thursday, our second day of the auction, and they start the auction at T1. And they go into basically the T40. So the first 40 cars of the auction will set the pace, and the remaining cars will be sold on Friday.
So Gus, something I would like to, because this collection is so great, but also I think a lot of people that view Mecum in the Morning haven't necessarily been to an auction before, bid either online, or what's the best way for people to actually find out about this collection, or if they have questions, like what avenue should they take?
Well, obviously we offer all those, whether you're in person, obviously you get to inspect the car. If you're on the phone, we're your eyes. So, if you register, you can also request a walk around the car and personally connect with the car via our staff members. So it's just like you're here. We want to make sure
that is
what
very
you're buying.
white glove.
Yeah, what you're buying is what you're getting when you get it. So your excitement shouldn't stop when you get the car in front of you, right? So we offer that. And also the internet. So, if you're going to be an internet bidder, which we also offer all those services for, it's a little harder because our internet registration, you're not required to tell us what cars you're on. You may be on 100 cars, so we can't really touch 100 cars for you.
Yeah.
So you have access to whenever you want.
Yeah.
But it still connects you, and you can make special requests.
How far in advance? So if someone sees this video or our show today, is excited about a particular vehicle, just say in the Kelsey collection, how far in advance should they register to bid online or over the phone?
Well, that would be today. That
Okay.
you know, we can pull it off last minute.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have at least a day's notice to get a little organized to make everyone jump through the hoops to accommodate everything, because we build the excitement.
And when you're here at the auction, what is your function? Because I see you sit in front of me. Like, what do you do? Like, you're always busy.
Yeah.
But are you handling phone bids? Are you internet? Or are you doing everything?
Yeah, well, everything except the internet.
Okay.
So I'm handling the phone bids. I'm back up on phones up here. So I'm part of the schedule with our phone bidding on people that are either pre-registered or last minute registering, so we get accommodated real quickly.
Yeah,
so that's
you're
the
always
primary
got a phone
function.
glued to your ear.
Yes.
It's
Well,
hard to catch a minute with you at the auction.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm
I
glad
feel
we
the
got
same.
some time with you this morning. Yeah.
This is my break.
Well, thank you for splitting it with
Pleasure.
us, Gus. And we're really excited to see these cars from the Kelsey collection cross the block. As Gus mentioned, they will start tomorrow, and then we have some going on Friday as well. And we're going to keep the education going, Breon, with our show. It's time to check in again with one of our favorite auctioneers, Matt Morvac.
Matt in the Hat.
Matt in the Hat, talking about what is a reserve.
Now 8. Now is actually going to be 8, now 9. Down $9,000, $900, $8,000, $9,000.
What's happening right now is we have a bidder that is active on the car. It was not meeting the seller's expectations. It was not meeting the seller's reserve price. So a bidder just now raised his offer. The owner of the car said, yes, I'll take that offer. We took the reserve off and just sold the car. So that's another thing that can happen, especially here in the collector car world. You may have one bidder that is interested in going all the way to the reserve price. And normally to help that out, our good bidders assistants out here will work with that potential buyer and say, hey, your $50,000 offer is not going to buy this car. The owner's looking more towards 60. Do you want to up your offer? And if the owner wants to do so, they can determine a number in between the number that is bid and the number that is asked or wanted. And if that happens, which a lot of times here it does, then the car is awarded to that buyer. So it is a want thing, especially in the collector car world. If it's something that you want, you have to be prepared to give it, because you might not always have the competition against you.
$12,000, yes or no? Last call, 12,000. What's bid $11,000?
Yeah.
So much education today.
So much education. And we'll actually be checking back in with Matt this week. We've got a exciting opportunity. Matt does some training and teaching of being an auctioneer, running an auction, and he has a class, I believe, that's coming out to the auction.
That's part of the classroom experience.
Part of the classroom experience, and what better way to see it in action than instead of being in a classroom to actually come out to a live auction.
He did corner me last night, and he did say that not only are you participating, but he told me I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I
All right.
have
Well,
no choice.
Class
Yeah.
is in session.
Yeah.
So. Oh,
Who's
man.
going to get an A? This girl.
Oh man!
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We might both get an A. We'll see.
Okay.
Hey, let's talk about some comments, Breon. They have been coming in about a lot of things, and our social media team asked specifically about some of the vehicles that are selling today from the Lost and Found collection. And this is a good opportunity, Breon. This type of vehicle is a great opportunity for someone to kind of have white space. Right, these vehicles were essentially lost and found.
Blank canvas, too.
Yeah, blank canvas, that works.
Yeah.
But all kinds of different conditions, all kinds of different statuses, and it's really a good opportunity for an enthusiast to make it their own. Mm-hmm. And it is a daunting task. Obviously, starting any kind of restoration is a challenging project. But our social media team posed the question, where would you start? In particular with this 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback. It is crossing the block today as lot W109. I like this body style, Brianna, and before we get into the comments, here's my question. Where would you start? So if you were the winning bidder and you had the keys, what would you do with this project?
Wash it.
Wash it?
Yeah. Yeah. But then I would actually, and I mean, you work with me. I am a spreadsheet person, so I would actually go through every aspect of the car and list out all the components in it, and then put what condition everything is, and then like the size of bolts or whatever, so when I'm going back I have something to reference. But I would sit there and imagine what the end of it would look like, and then kind of like work backwards. So if I wanted it to be black with black rims or whatever, then I would kind of like go back and start. I don't know. There's a lot to be done on this, and I'm actually laughing at some of the comments that we've seen.
What were some of the ones that we got in?
Let's see here. Put air in the tires. After that, I'm too old for all that work. That was pretty funny. Philip said, at the beginning, it's always best to start at the beginning.
Can't argue with that logic. I like that, Philip.
I mean, there's some stuff that I'm actually going to go swipe past because, just probably not appropriate for our show. Wash it 3 times, maybe 4. Kevin, why only 3 times, or why 3 times? Like,
Kevin's thorough. I like that about
Is
him.
3 a magic number?
I like that.
Someone said that they would start the door and a beer.
I read that comment.
Yeah.
I wondered if he meant like he would head for the door because it's too much. Like, I'm out. I just need a cold beer, and I want to watch what someone else does with this project.
Mike Kavanaugh said, like a home, just gut it. And I think, honestly, yes, with some of these, especially, whatever, like you want to take out all the things that probably need to be replaced or massively restored. Kevin McLayton actually was really thorough in his response. Remove the seats, remove the carpet, power wash inside, and out patch or replace the floorboard. Mark and cut out rusted areas on the body, replace with new metal, complete the rest of the body. Make sure you use the coat, the guide coat, and many, many, many more steps. I wonder what those many, because he was very thorough, and then I think he's just like, I'm going to stop.
He's just like,
I'm
figure it out.
A lot of people want to wash it. A lot of people.
Sure, and I think it's a good place to start. I'm surprised that no one, at least from the comments that I saw, point out what I would have done, which is to put in the modern Coyote powertrain.
I don't even know what that is, but it sounds very intense.
Cool. It's very intense.
Yeah.
Very intense.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to make this project your own, it is crossing the block today as lot W109, and we'll have to see where it goes.
And if you are one of the people or if you're the person that buys it, we want to know step by step of what you did to bring this beautiful Mustang back to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down, we talked about the top of the show, Breon, but we do have some new merch that's exclusive to the Dallas auction. We've got another tee in addition to the tank that I'm wearing. You can see it there with a whole Dallas motif on it. That's available in the merch area here on the red carpet. And then, as we talked about, we've got the trailer hitch.
We do.
We've got the tank, all kinds of fun stuff. And as always, if you can't make it out to the auction to purchase in person, you can always find that on the shop portion of the Mecum website.
It's been an awesome show today. I was so happy that Gus came on, and I look forward to the next 3 days of going big here in Texas with you, Matt.
Absolutely. Let's round up some fun. I don't know.
lasso it in.
Well, thanks for joining us. The auction live stream is going to start in just a couple moments. You can find that on Mecum.com, and we will find you here tomorrow for Mecum in the Morning, day 2 of Mecum Dallas.
Yeehaw.